Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the vice presidential election and some more provisions related to Vice President of India. Whatever details are given in the constitution, as also the related law and the rules that have been made. Along with that, we shall also look into some interesting facts related to the vice presidential election in India. So let us start our discussion. We know that we had the first Vice President of India, Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was elected twice, in fact, as Vice President in 1952 as also in the year 1957. Thereafter, we have seen, apart from Dr. Radhakrishnan, who became President as well afterwards, being the Vice President, we had a number of other Vice Presidents of India who later on became the President of India. And the prominent among these are first and foremost Dr. Zakir Hussain from 62 to 67. After that, we have Mr. V.V. Giri from 1967 to 69, Mr. R. Venkatraman from 1984 to 87, Dr. Shankar Dayal Sharma 87 to 92, and Mr. K.R. Narayanan from 1992 to 1997. Now, this trend had been there where the vice presidents had used to become the President of India. It was relevant in the earlier phase when there was a dominance of one party. As we have seen the emergence of more opposition parties, or when our system became bipolar or multipolar in terms of political parties, this trend has declined. The reason being that the presidential election has become more contestable, and therefore we haven't seen after Mr. K.R. Narayanan anyone else becoming the President of India who was earlier Vice President of India. Further, if we look at the position of Vice President, Article 63 of the Constitution, it talks about the Vice President of India. It says that there shall be a Vice President of India. Article 64 says that Vice President will also act as the ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Then 65, Article 65, it says that the Vice President may also act as the President of India, of course under certain circumstances, whenever there is a vacancy because of, or there is an absence of the President. In both these cases, the Vice President of India will be acting as President of India. Now, we have had such occasions also in the past wherein the vacancy was created when the President Dr. Zakir Hussain had died in the year 1969, and at that point of time we had Justice Hidayatullah who acted as he was the Chief Justice of India who acted as the President of India. Now, on this occasion, Vice President was Mr. V.V. Giri, who had resigned from the position of Vice President. So, he could not act as a acting President. Instead of him, the Chief Justice of India acted as the President of India. So, this was one of the occasions where the Vice President could have actually acted as the President of India, but it did not happen here. Next time it happened was when Mr. Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed died as President of India, and at that point of time, the Vice President, Mr. B.D. Jatti, acted as the President of India. This is the only occasion where we have seen that the Vice President had been acting as the President of India because of sudden demise of the President. Now, whenever such a vacancy or absence is there and the Vice President is acting as the President of India, in that case, he is not going to be acting as the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. This is very clearly mentioned in Article 64. And then, whenever he is acting as President, he will have all the powers and immunity of the President of India. He shall be having the emoluments, allowances and the privileges which is determined by a law of the Parliament, which is more likely to be equal to that of the President of India, and also that he will not get his salary or allowance as the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. So, these are some of the facts which are mentioned in Article 64, 65 and 63. Article 64, whatever is mentioned here in green color, this is all given in Article 64, rest of it is given in Article 65. Let us move ahead further now. Now, Article 67 of the Constitution, it talks about the term of office of the Vice President of India, and which is fixed at 5 years. But then, of course, he may resign writing to the President, and this has happened a couple of times. Like recently it has happened that our Vice President has resigned, and therefore we are having this election. Before this, it had happened earlier when Mr. V.V. Giri had to resign because he was Vice President of India. He resigned to contest for the election of the President. Mr. V.V. Giri had become the Vice President in the year 1967 when he had defeated Muhammad Habib. And in 1969, when he resigned, at this point of time, he became the President of India, and in 1969 itself, because of this resignation, a vice presidential election also happened. So this time it was Mr. Gopal Swarup Pathak who won the election in 1969, and he was elected unopposed. So these are some of the facts related to when the vice presidents of India have resigned, creating a vacancy over there for new election, or the vice president can also be removed, though this has never happened. We had seen some notices were given for the removal of the Vice President of India recently, Mr. Jagdeep Dhankar, but that notice was not accepted. So we have never had this occasion wherein a Vice President has actually been removed. It also says, Article 67 also says that the expiration of the term, whenever there will be a vacancy in relation to expiration of the term, in that case, the person who is the vice president, he will continue to act as a vice president till the time a new vice president is elected. So these are the information given in Article 67. Then Article 68 is talking about the time for holding the elections to fill the vacancy, within how much time this election need to be organized. So as we have seen recently, the vice president has resigned. So the expiration, if the vacancy has been created by the expiration of the term of the vice president, in that case, it has to be, the election needs to be organized before the expiration of the term, but a little more detail is given in the law and we shall see that a little later on. Second reason why there can be an election is because of death or resignation or removal. So in this case, it is mentioned that the election needs to be organized as soon as possible. No matter howsoever the vacancy has been created and the new election is being organized, in both these cases, we see that in both these cases, the term of office of the newly elected vice president who will be elected in this vice presidential election, this will also be for 5 years. So he will also enjoy a term of full 5 years over here. Let's move further now, look into what Article 66 of the Constitution says. It tells us something about the election of the vice president, how the election will be organized. So Article 66 says that the election of the vice president will be organized. In fact, it will be elected, but first and foremost, who will organize this election? So Article 324 of the Constitution, which is related to Election Commission, it itself clearly mentions that the election for president and vice president will also be organized by the Election Commission. So election is to be organized by the Election Commission, and the process of election involve an indirect election by the members of that are included in the Electoral College, which will be including the members of the parliament of both the houses, and here we have the elected as well as the nominated members, and both houses MPs are there, both nominated and elected, and then by proportional representation and single transferable vote. This I am going to explain a little later on, this entire process of how the electoral quota is fixed and how the election happens. We are just looking at the provisions which are given in Article 66 over here, and it will be through a secret ballot. So this much of information is mentioned in Article 66. After this, it was Dr. Zakir Hussain in 1962 had defeated NC Saman Sinhar. Now this fact why we are talking about over here is because this is the first time that an actual contest happened, because before Dr. Zakir Hussain, on all the occasions when Dr. Radhakrishnan became Vice President of India, he was elected unopposed. So no meaningful contest had taken place before this. So it was the 1962 election that we could see for the first time a meaningful contest happening. In fact, in all these years, in fact, even in 1962 and a little later on, we will find that all the vice presidential election, they happen to be independent candidates. So it will be in 1974, we will figure out that for the first time, the Indian National Congress will field this candidate. Before 1974, all the elections for the vice president, it had seen the independent candidates standing for the elections. Okay, now the eligibility for the election for the vice president is also mentioned in Article 66. It says that the person who has attained an age of 35 years and who is a citizen of India, and along with that, he should be eligible or he should be qualified to be elected as a member of the Rajya Sabha, and along with that, he should not be holding any office of profit under the government of India or state government, including any local or other authority. So, citizen of India, 35 years of age, the person need to be qualified as a member of Rajya Sabha. He should be eligible for election for the Rajya Sabha, and that he should not occupy any office of profit under the Government of India or any local or the other authority. But here we have an exception also, and the exception is that President, Vice President, Governor and any of the ministers in the central government or in the state government, they being in their position, they still can fight for vice presidential election. That is, they need not to resign from these positions, right? And ministers will obviously be including the prime minister as well as the chief minister. So in the position of president, someone in the position of president or in vice president's position or prime minister or chief minister or minister in the central government or state government, they need not to resign from their position when they are standing for the election of the president. It is only after election that they will be required to resign, because being the vice president, you cannot occupy any other office of profit. So this office of profit which we are talking about here is in the government of the center and the state and local authorities and other authorities, and this is in relation only for qualification. Now we see that it has happened couple of times that the incumbent vice president himself wants to fight for another election. This happened with Dr. Radhakrishnan also, and it happened with Hamid Ansari as well, because both these people, they are only two people who have been vice president of India twice. Though it has happened a number of times that a vice president had been contesting for a second time, but only two people have been able to win this office twice, Dr. Radhakrishnan as well as Hamid Ansari. So Hamid Ansari, he became the Vice President of India first in 2007 when he defeated Nazma Heptullah, and in 2012 when Hamid Ansari defeated Jaswant Singh. So these are some of the facts also related to the election of Vice President of India. Then talking about the condition for office, which is also mentioned in the same article, condition for office is that the Article 66 clause 2 says that he should not be a member, the person who gets elected. Now when we say condition, means that after the person has got elected as Vice President of India, now what condition needs to be fulfilled? If there is a person who has been a member of either House of the Parliament or of the state legislature, then he will have to vacate, and if he doesn't resign, then he shall be deemed to have vacated. That means he will not be occupying the membership of the houses. In fact, we had this with Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, who actually was a member of Rajya Sabha when he stood for the election of Vice President, and he had to resign from the membership of the Rajya Sabha. So he shall be deemed to have vacated membership, as I mentioned. Then Article 64 says that he should not occupy any other office of profit. So being in any other position, this office of profit is very broadly defined. We know that it applies as in case of President of India also, that it should, any office which is bringing any kind of pecuniary benefit will be considered as office of profit, until unless it has been made an exception under a law of the Parliament, that is Parliament Prevention of Disqualification Act of 1959. So if that office is mentioned in that act, then it is exempted. Otherwise, all offices which is generating any kind of pecuniary benefit will be considered as office of profit for the purpose. Now, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, he had won the vice presidential election in the year 2017 when he had defeated Mr. Gopal Krishna Gandhi. Let's move forward. Article 70, now this we are going to talk about is the overall process of election, and the process of election is not detailed in the constitution. The process of election, it is mentioned in the law of the Parliament, and Article 71 clause 3 says that it is Parliament which will be making the law to regulate the process of election for the President as well as the Vice President. So all matters related to election for President and Vice President to be these are regulated by the law of the Parliament. In that relation, Parliament has made this law, Presidential and Vice Presidential Election Act of 1952. The Presidential and Vice Presidential Election Act 1952 gives us the detail, and we will just look into the sequence of how the process of Vice Presidential election happens. So let us look into the detailed provisions here. According to this act, first and foremost, the notification will be issued by the Election Commission. As I mentioned, Election Commission itself is going to organize this entire process of election. So notification is to be issued by the Election Commission, and notification, the time when the notification is to be issued, it has to be seen that how the vacancy has been created. If the vacancy has been created because of the expiry of the term, then the notification for election has to be issued as soon as convenient after 60th day before the expiry of the term. That means before, when the term is to expire, before 60 days, around before 60 days, they will coming up with the notification. But it should not be more than 60 days. It should be 60 days before the expiry of the term, right? Less than 60 days, it should be when you have to issue the notification in case of the vacancy being created by the expiry of the term. And if the vacancy is created by death or resignation or removal, as has happened recently, because of resignation the vacancy has been created, then in that case it should be as soon as the vacancy is created, and this is to be decided by the Election Commission. As soon as possible, it needs to be full. No time limit has been mentioned, but of course the Election Commission will have to be expedient in this entire process. Now, it had happened once that the incumbent vice president had died in office, Mr. Krishna Kant, and he was almost about to complete his tenure. He was elected as the Vice President of India in 1997, and he remained as Vice President till 2002. When he won the election, he had defeated Mr. Surjit Singh Barnala, and he died in the year 2002 when his tenure was almost about to get over. So a vacancy was created, but then it was accommodated in the regular process of election for that particular year, wherein it was anyhow to happen. After the notification has been issued, there will be appointment of a returning officer and an assistant returning officer. In case of vice presidential election, we have the Secretary General of the Rajya Sabha or the Secretary General of the Lok Sabha. They themselves are appointed as the returning officer, and this would be in rotation. That one particular time Secretary General of the Rajya Sabha, next time it will be Secretary General of the Lok Sabha, and so on. And the assistant returning officer would be any senior most officers of the Secretariat of Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. All these officers are appointed by the Election Commission. So they are the people who are going to basically oversee this entire process of election. The returning officer, the public notice is invited for the purpose of nomination. So once the public notice has been given, that means the nomination has been invited. In the process of nomination, there are certain criteria, certain conditions, certain requirements are there which needs to be fulfilled as per the law of the parliament. So in the nomination, what is mentioned is that the last date of nomination will be 14 days after the date of notification. Second thing is that the person who is filing the nomination, first and foremost, who will file the nomination? The person, the candidate himself will either file the nomination, or someone who is proposing his name or seconding his name, they may also file the nomination. So certified copy of their entry in the roll is required, because you have to prove that you are an registered voter for the Rajya Sabha elections, because in Rajya Sabha election also it is required that the person need to be registered in any constituency in India. So that proof is required. So that's why we have the certified copy, and then 20 electors need to support as proposer the nomination, and 20 more have to second those nomination papers. So overall 20 proposers and 20 seconders are required for proposing the name of the candidate. Remember that one person, one elector cannot propose the name or cannot second the name of more than one candidate. Okay, so no one to subscribe more than one nomination paper from amongst the electors. But more than one nomination paper can be filed on behalf of a candidate. So either the candidate himself is filing the nomination paper, or any of his proposer or seconder is filing the nomination paper. There can be more than one nomination filed on behalf of one candidate, but it should not be more than 4 nomination. Okay, so nomination can be more than one nomination, more than one paper, but it cannot exceed more than 4 nomination. Whenever the nomination is going to be filed, then a security deposit of 15,000 needs to be deposited with the Reserve Bank of India. And even when you are filing for more than one nomination, only one security deposit is required. After nomination, we have the scrutiny of the nomination. And for the scrutiny of the nomination, the time which has been given is 1 day after the last date of nomination. So you will figure out that this process of election is more or less very similar process as it is there in case of the election for the members of the parliament, like Lok Sabha elections, as it is mentioned in the Representation of People's Act. So more or less with slight differences in terms of, like here they have 14 days. In case of Representation of People's Act for Lok Sabha elections, we have 7 days. So there are slight differences, otherwise more or less the process is similar to that. Scrutiny of the nomination, whenever it will happen, then the presence of a proposer, a seconder and another person, another representative of the candidate is allowed at the time of scrutiny of the nominations. After the scrutiny of the nomination, there will be withdrawal of candidature. Withdrawal of candidature, this can happen in 2 days after the 2 days after the date for scrutiny of nominations. 2 more days are there for withdrawal of candidature. After that, we have the polling taking place. When the polling will take place? Polling takes place not earlier than 15 days after the last date of withdrawal. So we'll just go that in sequence, and from that itself you can calculate the number of dates which are days which are there for each of these processes. Counting, this will happen on a fixed date. Usually it will be after the polling itself. The supervision, under the supervision of the returning officer, the counting will take place. Candidates or one representative, they are allowed to be present at the time of the counting, and the result will be declared by the returning officer. And of course, there will be forfeiture of the deposit also in case if any candidate is not getting the stipulated number of votes, and which has been prescribed to be 1/6 of the total votes which are required to win the election. Remember, it is 1/6 of the vote for return. As many votes which are required to win the election, if any candidate doesn't get 1/6 of that, then his deposit will be forfeited. Okay, now let us see some more provisions. The jurisdiction of the civil courts have been barred. That means any action or decision of a returning officer or any of these officers which are involved there in this process, they cannot be questioned in any civil courts, right? Their actions or decisions. And any dispute related to election, the petition can be filed only in the Supreme Court according to this law. That is Presidential and Vice Presidential Election Act 1952. Petition will only go in the Supreme Court. The petition will be filed either by the candidate himself, or it will be jointly filed by overall 10 or more electors, not less than 10. So 10 more electors, that means those people who are members in the electoral college, 10 of them will put up a joint petition, then only it will be taken up. And if we are mentioning about this petition, in the Supreme Court, then maybe we'll just mention a fact over here that we also had a former Chief Justice of India becoming the Vice President of India, Muhammad Hidayatullah, who won the election unopposed in the year 1979. One more fact we can mention here is that Mr. Hidayatullah was one of the judges in the Golaknath case, right, where he had written in his judgment that fundamental rights cannot be amended by the parliament. So in this judgment actually went against the government of the day, and probably therefore he becomes an eligible candidate by the Janata, for the Janata Party to field him for the vice presidential election, and he becomes the vice president in the year 1979. Okay, let us look at now further the power to make rules. One of the provisions in the act itself is that the further rules can be made for detailing on the process of election. So the rules are made by the central government on the recommendations of the Election Commission, and these rules, they have to be presented before each house of the parliament, and the parliament may modify the rules also, as it has been prepared by the government in consultation with the Election Commission, or parliament may also say that some of these rules are not required, or the rules themselves are not required. So exceptions can be made by the parliament therein. The rule that has been made in this regard is the Presidential and Vice Presidential Election Rules 1974. It was only when the elections were become more contestable, rather more politically contestable, that there was a requirement of coming up with even more detailed process of election. Before that also there was a rule of 1952, and now the 1950 rule was replaced by 1974 rules. So this rule of 1974 will be a little more elaborate. It is here we can mention that it was in the year 1974 itself. I had just mentioned this before also, that in the year 1974 itself, for the first time, that the vice presidential election, it became politically contestable, in the sense that this is the first time that the contestants, the meaningful contestants, they are represented by political parties. Before this, the elections have been mostly of the independent candidates who were fighting the elections. It was in this election that the Indian National Congress had fielded Mr. B.D. Jatti, who becomes the vice president in 1974, defeating Niral N.M. Horo of the Jharkhand party. So this is the first election, you can say, where the political parties directly getting into the contest, 1974. Now we can look into though it is not as important. The Act is more important, its provisions are more important, but to understand the process in little more detail, we can also look into the provisions which are given in this rule, that is presidential and vice presidential election rules of 1974. What all is given in this rule? Let us see. First and foremost, the rule talks about various forms, right? In what format certain things need to be submitted or carried on, like forms related to the public notice for the notification which came up, which was notified by the returning officer, by the election commission, you can say. Then the nomination paper, what format will be there, notice of withdrawal of candidate, the preparation and publication of list of contesting candidate, design and form of ballot papers. Ballot paper here are actually pink in color, and they have two columns. On one side the names of the candidates are written, and on the other side the preferences are to be marked, which I will just mention about how the overall voting takes place and how the votes are counted. Then the rules also includes the place and time where the polling will take place. The place, of course, will be the Parliament House. So all the members are the members of Parliament in the Electoral College, so they will be participating in the election at the Parliament House itself, and the time will be fixed in terms of hour of polling by the Election Commission. The rule also says that the presiding officers will be the returning officer or assistant returning officer. They will be conducting the polls themselves. So I told you who will be appointed as the returning officer, and then further polling officers can also be appointed by the returning officer as per the requirement. Then further the rule says that the manner of recording votes. So how the votes are to be recorded? This is here what we are talking about is the preferences. They are to be marked in the ballot paper. So it is a proportional representation system and single transferable vote. So basically in the election of vice president, we have all the members of parliament participating of both the houses, elected as well as nominated. Each vote of every member count as only one, unlike the presidential election, because in presidential election it happened to be the representative of states also, and because we need to develop parity between the overall votes of the center and overall votes coming from the states, because of that the value of vote is assigned in case of presidential election. But in case of the vice president election, one vote will carry only one value of 1. That means one vote will count as 1. So the electoral quota is fixed, and this will be overall valid votes which will be given divided by 2 plus 1. That is, any candidate who gets more than half of the valid vote will be declared as elected. Now if you have more candidates in the fray, then in that case on the ballot paper, as many number of candidates which are there, their names will be published in the ballot paper, and the members or the electors, they are required to mark their preferences 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. Now the figure of 1 is necessarily to be marked. Any elector may not mark more than one preference also, the vote will still remain valid. Vote will be invalidated in case of wrong markings. But if you have given just one preference and you have not given other preferences, the vote will be valid. So genuinely the electors which are participating in election, they have to mark all their preferences. So all the candidates, they have got their votes. Now the counting will happen. If any candidate, the total number of first preference, it reaches to the required electoral quota, that is more than half of the total votes, then he wins the election. And if suppose there are more candidates and the vote gets divided, in that case we will have to do elimination. So before we get into the second round of counting, the person who has got the least number of first preferences in his votes are taken out, and according to the second preference in each of his votes to the respective candidates, the votes are transferred, which we call as single transferable vote. And when the votes have been transferred to the other candidates, and this will become their first, that means their first preference has been increased by each as many number of votes as they have got in these votes of the person who has been removed. So all their first preference will increase. And now again you will check whether any candidate has crossed the electoral quota. If any one candidate has crossed, he will win the election. Otherwise, the same process will go on repeated. So this is the process of proportional representation and single transferable vote. So no ballot paper will be invalid if preferences are not marked. That means if all the preferences are not marked, figure 1 has to be marked. Preference may be marked in international form of Indian numerals or in the Roman form. This is not as important, but still You never know, you get an options in the question like this. Adjournment of poll can take place if proceeding gets interrupted by any kind of obstruction, by riots, or there is open violence, or it is not possible to take the poll because of natural calamities or because of any other sufficient reasons. In that case, the polls can be adjourned. This will be done by the presiding officer, and I'm mentioning one more fact here. In 2002, Mr. Bhairo Singh Shekhawat, this is perhaps the most, you can say the most divided election that had happened. Mr. Bhairo Singh Shekhawat had defeated Sushil Kumar Shinde in the year 2002, wherein he got around 58.9% vote, and rest of the votes it went to his opponent. So this was the most divided election ever as far as vice presidential election is concerned. Then after this, there are a few more points herein, like the voting. For voting, I mean, all the members will have to be present at the time of voting. They will be physically voting. Postal voting can be given only by one set of people, those who are in the preventive detention. Otherwise, postal voting will not take place. So those in preventive detention, they can vote, but by postal ballot. Place and time for counting of votes is at the office of returning officer in New Delhi, and date and time fixed by the Election Commission. Recounting can happen when the returning officer can decide on his own initiative or at the instance of any of the candidate or their representative. So these are some important provisions which are given in the rules. So this, we can say, this all the details of the vice presidential election that we had to talk about here. Thank you.